Hello, Swift. We're going to extend your knowledge with extensions for alerts. We're going to learn about threads, and we're going to improve the user's experience. Topics include jump bar comment markers, to do, fix me, mark, and creating the horizontal line. We'll discuss threads, the main dispatch queue, background threads, and fixing crashes related to UI work on the wrong thread. We'll extend what we know about extensions. We'll create a reusable UIViewController extension to show an alert. And we'll set up funcs that can pass values to completion handlers. Let's get at it, Swifter. Here's how our app runs so far. When our app first runs, viewDidLoad calls local notification manager and runs authorized notifications. This prompts the user to allow or deny local notifications. The user clicks allow, our app can send notifications, and we print out down in the console, notification authorization granted. Now what happens if we turn off our notifications and rerun? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to the home screen, I'm going to go into settings, select my app, turn off notifications, and rerun. We see a message printed to the console stating the user has denied notifications. And while it's nice that while developing the app we can be reminded in the console, a running app doesn't have an Xcode console. So this is of no use at all to our users. What we need is an alert to warn the user that they won't see notifications unless they change the app's settings. Perhaps this sounds familiar. Now remember this guy, this comment down here, we left a to-do inside our authorized local notifications, which we'd previously copied over into this local notification manager file. This was to remind us we have something to do, which is specifically insert this alert. Now the to-do actually shows an icon in the jump bar, reminding us that we've got something to do. And it's one of 3 possible additional comments we can offer that stand out in the jump bar. One is fix me, one is to do, the other is mark. Each one shows up in the jump bar with a different icon. And if you enter a comment in your code inside of a function, the icon and the comment are indented in the jump bar just below that same function. Also note that typing a dash in a marked comment will create a thin gray separator line in the jump bar and in your code, while typing a dash as part of the comment, like I've done here before and after the comment text, will show the comment between separator lines both in the code itself as well as in the jump bar. So okay, those marks are nice touches to have for commenting our code, but let's complete the to-do comment in our to-do app. What we want to do is we want to show an alert, and we've already written code in a previous app to show a one-button alert. Do you remember this code that we had done? First, we create an alert controller using UIViewController. We pass in a title and a message. We set up a default action. We add the action to the alert, and then we present this alert controller that we just created. Hey, can we use the same code inside of our local notification manager? Let's give it a try. So let's write these lines. 4 steps. The first thing that we do is we'll create a new alert controller. So we'll say let alert controller equals UIViewController, and hey, UIViewController isn't showing up in code completion. We're getting an error here that says UIViewController is an unresolved identifier. That means this file that we're in, local notification manager, doesn't even know that this thing called UIViewController, which is part of iOS, even exists. Now, why do you suppose we're getting that? Why don't you pause, think about it for a second, unpause. The reason why, and we ran into this in a previous video, is we've just imported Foundation, and that's all you get when you create a new Swift file in Xcode. But UIViewController is actually part of UIKit. It's got the UI in front of it, so we'll just replace Foundation with UIKit. We could actually just do an import UIKit right underneath Foundation, but UIKit has all of the stuff that's inside of Foundation. If we added them both, Xcode wouldn't add any extra code in there. The compiler's pretty smart, but we don't need that extra line. So we'll just put UIKit in here in place of Foundation. I'll shift Command K, delete UIViewController, and when I type UIViewController now, it shows up in code completion. Now open paren, let's choose the one down here with the title and message. For title and message, let's put in empty strings for now. We'll go back and fix this. And for preferred style, type .alert. The second step is we need to create an alert action, so we'll call that default action saying let default action equals, and then type in UIAlert, open parentheses. We'll select this option down here with title, style, and handler. For title, we'll just put in the string OK. For style, we'll put in .default, and the handler will be nil. Step 3 is to add this default action to our alert controller. So we do that with a method. We say alert controller, which is what we created above, .add action, and then inside parentheses, we put in default action, the thing we just created. And then all we have to do is present the view controller on the current view controller. So we refer to the current view controller as self.present, and oh skunk, it's not working. When I start to type .present, Nothing is showing up in code completion. What's going on here? Aha! Self refers to the file that we're currently in. So previously when we used this, we were inside of a subclass of UIViewController. So we were trying to do present on ViewController, and present is a ViewController method. Here, if we option click local notification, well, that's a brand new struct that we created called local notification manager. It is not a UIViewController or a subclass of UIViewController, so it doesn't have a .present method. I wonder what we could do. Oh, I know. Why don't we modify authorized local notifications so that we pass in a view controller, and then we can use that value that we pass in to call present. So even though there's not a view controller in here for us to use self, if the function accepts a view controller as a parameter, and we call that, then we can use the .present method in that ViewController parameter to display our alert controller. Now remember where we previously called this authorized local notifications manager? We did that inside of to-do list ViewController. So we'll modify this. We'll still call this function, but now we'll pass in as the ViewController self. This is a UIViewController. It'll come in here into our local notification manager struct, and then we can use this value that we passed in here to leverage its present method and present the alert controller. Will this work? Let's see. Let's head back to Xcode into the file local notification manager. Under authorized local notifications, we currently have no parameters. Let's add a parameter. We'll call it lower camel case view controller. Then colon, we'll give the type in here as UIViewController. Go down inside of this function where we tried to call the present method on self and it didn't show up. We're going to replace self now with ViewController, which is the parameter that we just entered into this function. And then if we say dot and start to type in the word present, hey, sure enough, we see that we've got a method in here. See the M, which is present view controller. That's what we want. Press return for our view controller parameter. That's going to be our alert controller. Animated will be true. Completion will be nil. Since we just added a parameter to this, we need to return to-do list view controller, and inside of view did load, that's where we called local notification manager dot authorized local notifications. I'll backspace over the parentheses in there. Then I'll do a shift command K, making sure that Xcode knows about the changes I just made. And sure enough, if I start to retype the end of authorized local notifications, I can see now it wants a view controller parameter. Press return to accept that. View controller we're going to pass in is going to be self, because remember, self refers to this current class, which is this file that we're in here, which is to-do list view controller, which is a subclass of UIViewController. So this is perfectly fine. Build and run. Let's see if this works. And oh, this is one gnarly error. We've never had one like this before. This is utterly unintelligible. If we scroll up above all of these numbers in here that show up with all sorts of stuff, I'll show you how we can Sherlock out what caused this problem. It'll give us a chance to talk about threads, something we haven't addressed so far, and how to fix this issue. We can look above first throw stack call, and we see it says modifications to layout engine must not be performed from a background thread after it has been accessed from the main thread. Oh man, what does this mean? Well, it's not very helpful for the new programmer, but it is helpful if you know what to look for. So let's learn about this through an illustration. You can think of your app as having several lanes of processing, and we haven't talked about this before. These are called threads. So there's the fast lane, or the main thread, that gets processing priority. It contains all of the things that keep your app running quickly, snappy, and responding to the user. All of the user interface execution stuff, presenting view controllers, responding to events like a button press, those are all inside the main thread, inside this fast lane. Now there can also be one or more slow lanes for background tasks that don't have the priority of the stuff in the main thread. And that's where iOS is going to run all of the UN User Notification Center stuff. All the local notification stuff that we need is in the background, it's slow lane stuff. By pushing things into the background, they're not going to slow down the overall execution of our app. And most of the time, iOS takes care of this on its own. Now, our app's use of iOS Notification Center is handled on a background thread. Now, if we call main thread task, like the view controller method present, inside the slow lane or the background thread, we're going to get a crash. Now there's really no way for a new programmer to know what's happening here, but to clue you in, now let's look at our code. Inside of Local Notification Manager, inside of Authorized Local Notifications, we've got this method in here that calls UN Notification Center. And you see how there's curlies after this? That means we're running a closure. Now if we take a look down below here, we're referring to user interface stuff inside this closure. The closure's running in the slow lane, but if we want to do stuff for the user interface, like this line here that says viewcontroller.present, this has got to be in the fast lane. How are we going to fix this? And we can do that with this little chunk of code, dispatch_queue.main.async. And anything in between the curlies here will run on the main queue. That means it'll be bumped up into the fast lane, it'll fix the problem that we have here, and we won't get this gnarly crash. So even though the crash was unfriendly, now you know what to look for, and now you know how to solve the problem. So now that we're back in the code, let's go ahead and fix this problem. All we need to do is to take these 4 lines of code that deal with user interface things that should be in the fast lane and put them inside of the completion handler that follows dispatch_queue.main.async. So we'll type in dispatch_queue.main.async, press return, the curly show up, highlight and cut out these lines, paste them in between the curlies. This code will be pushed to the main thread. We won't get that error. Let's clean things up here. I no longer need my to-do comment because that is done. And I can also fix the indentation with a Command A to select all and a Control I to fix the indents. Looking good. Build and run. And no error, but my alert is empty. And how come? Oh yeah, it's because I put empty strings in for the title and for the message. Let's go back and fix that right now. Right in the line where we set up our alert controller, we'll put in the title as user has not allowed notifications. Apple likes us to capitalize every word in the title. And for the message, why don't we put in to receive alerts for reminders, open the settings app, select to-do list, greater than symbol, notifications, greater than symbol, allow notifications. Now let's build and run and see how it looks. And we're good. No errors, we're showing an alert. Title and message are showing. Nice work. And hey, let's take a look. The 4 lines of code that we have in here in the dispatch queue show an alert, but that's not something that we just want to do inside of our local notification manager. This is something that you might want to call in lots of different places, in lots of different apps. This is the perfect thing to be able to break out into one of those helper structs or helper classes. But there's another way to be able to create something which is reusable. We're going to leverage extensions in a way that we've never used them before, and this will really get at some of the power behind extensions in Swift. Now we're going to create an extension of UIViewController. So this is the generic class that represents all view controllers, and that includes any of the subclasses of UIViewController. So if you ever go in and create a new view controller as a Cocoa Touch class, all of those would have access to UIViewController's extension if you had this file in your code. And the same goes for any subclasses Apple has created from UIViewController. So for example, UITableViewController, that's a subclass of UIViewController. Once we extend UIViewController, any of the UIViewController subclasses, including UITableViewController and anything we subclass from UITableViewController, all have access to this method too. And this is super powerful when you think about it. It's almost like we are changing the underlying Swift language. We're extending it by adding in our own stuff. If you wanted to add an additional method or function on the back of a string, on the back of a double, you could do that. So what's nice about this is if we create this in a separate file, then any app that we have that has this file with this extension in it will have access to this one button alert. Now to create a separate file to hold this extension, there's a naming convention that many developers use. It's the name of the class, so in our case it's going to be UIViewController, and then you say plus, and typically there's some kind of description. If it's only one method, for example, then you'll put the function name in here. We'll say plus alert, because we might do more than one alert in here. Right now we only have our one button alert, but you can feel free to expand on this in the future. Cool, so let's build our extension. Since I've already got my helpers up top, I'm going to click on my local notification manager and I'm going to create my new file right underneath this. So I'll do File, New File. This will be a Swift file. Select Next. I'm going to call this UIViewController plus alert, which is again that extension convention. Create. And we've got a home for this extension. Now, since we're going to be working with UI elements in here, I need to change import foundation to import UI kit. Then we'll say extension, we're extending UIViewController, one of Apple's classes, open and close parentheses. Inside we'll say func, one button alert. We'll have 2 parameters in here, title, which is a string, message, which is a string, and in between the curlies, what we can do is we can go back to local notification manager, highlight those 4 lines, cut them with a Command X, return to our extension file, and paste these 4 lines in between the curlies. Now on this first line here, when we set up our alert controller, we pass in 2 string literals. We don't want to do that. We want to use our title and our message parameter. So I'm just going to copy this so that I can keep the string literals and use them later. But then I'm going to highlight what I have inside here for the string literals, and I'm going to replace title with title and message with message, those 2 parameters for this function. I'm getting an error down here because I say ViewController as the ViewController this is called on. I'm no longer passing in a parameter ViewController, but since this is a subclass of UIViewController, we can just refer to self. That'll mean, hey, whatever ViewController I call this on. So we'll highlight this ViewController that used to be a variable, just type in self over top of it. Then I'll go back to the local notification manager. In between the parentheses of the dispatch queue main async, I'll type in, I'm going to do a Shift Command K. Whoops, I've got to stop the execution. So now I can type in ViewController dot, and notice when I start to type in dot alert, I forgot the name of my function, but I can see 1 button alert shows up in code completion. Awesome. Xcode knew ViewController was of type UIViewController, so it gave me access to this method that I added in my extension. Press Enter to accept this. And what I'll do is down below here, I'll paste in that line that I'd copied previously and just copy and paste these string literals for the title line and the message line and get rid of this old line that I'd pasted in. And just to drive the point home, if we option click on ViewController, it says, yes, this is a subclass of UIViewController, and that's why we have access to everything in that new extension that we just created. Now we're looking good. We can go ahead and build and run, see how things look. And perfect! No change at all, but no errors, and we've got a reusable extension that we can add to any future app, and that'll allow us to call this 1 button alert function on anything that's a subclass of Apple's UIViewController. Nice! You now have the power of extensions in Swift. So our app is pretty well written for an intermediate Swift app. We've done a lot in here, but we've still got a couple of what we might call edge cases or user scenarios where the app isn't going to perform exactly like the user might expect. One of them is this. If the user notifications are off, then we shouldn't allow the user to set notifications. We don't want anybody to get the wrong impression that they'll get a notification if they haven't allowed notifications. So in here, when we click on a reminder set switch, we should check to see if notifications are enabled. And if not, instead of allowing the user to select a date and time like we do here, we should turn off the reminder switch and display the alert that says, hey, if you want to see reminders, you've got to go into settings, select the app, and allow notifications. So we have a function that checks to see if the user has allowed notifications, but we don't have one that reports back the results. If notifications are allowed, no changes in how the app runs, but if notifications are not allowed, we want to make sure that any attempts to turn on the reminder switch get a warning and the reminder switch gets turned off. And we need to do that last bit, showing the alert and switching off the reminder switch if it's on, after we get the result on whether or not notifications are allowed. So doing something after we get results from our function implies a completion handler, that guy that we did with the @escaping in the earlier video. So let's see how we might modify this function in order to be able to give us the results we need. So let's take our existing authorized notifications function and make some modifications. We'll copy and paste it, and we'll rename this new function isAuthorized. And instead of having the single parameter that's the view controller, what we'll do here is we'll call 1 button alert outside of the function. So we'll actually remove that from this function. In fact, we'll allow the user to do that in the completion handler if they want to. We'll add a completion handler, so we have to add this @escaping part. But look what's different here. Instead of having empty parens, arrow, empty parens, we've got a bool type in the first set of parens. Well, what that says is we're going to be passing back a bool into the completion handler. So anyone using this code can write a completion handler and know if the result is either true or false. And the way we write completed is we pass the bool in. So you can see the parentheses after completed used to be empty. Now here, since we're passing out a bool value to the completion handler, we use completed with either true or false inside of it. So let's write this and then use it. So let's go into Local Notification Manager, highlight all of our authorized local notification function, and paste it below. This is what we're going to modify. We'll change the name of this function to isAuthorized. Now we're not going to show our alert in this function, so I'm going to highlight this entire dispatch queue down here, including the call to 1 button alert, and I'm going to backspace to delete that. And since I'm not displaying the alert, I can get rid of my ViewController parameter that I was passing into the old function. And this new function is going to have a completion handler. So we'll say completed : and then at escaping. And previously when we wrote completion handlers, we did an empty parens, arrow, empty parens. But here we're going to put a bool in the first set of empty parens. That means the completion handler is going to pass back a value of type bool. And the way that we do that is we write completed, but instead of empty parens afterward, we put in either false or true. Down here in the guard statement, we want to pass back false because we've got an error, so we'll say completed and in parentheses false. I'll highlight and copy this, and we're going to keep our return in here because remember, this is a guard statement, so we return early. But then if we get down here to the if else, well, if the user has denied notifications, then we also want to say completed false. But if the user has granted notifications, we'll pass back completed in parentheses true. Now, why did we go through all this trouble? Because we want to use the result of is authorized in our to-do detail table view controller. Specifically, we've got a function down here, update user interface. And so we want to check to see, hey, has the user granted permissions to send notifications? And if not, we want to make sure that we shut off the reminder switch, so set is on to false, even if we had previously set the reminder switch to true. So since we're going to have a few lines of code that are going to be used to update our switch, why don't we create a new function, and we'll call that func update reminder switch. We'll have no parameters that we're passing in there, but we'll call that from the end of update user interface. Then inside we'll call local notification manager dot is authorized, so the function that we just wrote is there. We see that it's got no parameters except for this completion handler. So if you double click on where it has the bool and the arrow in there, we'll see that Xcode will automatically convert this to the trailing closure syntax, which is a little bit easier to read, and it highlights the word bool, so we can name the bool value that's passed back anything we want. Why don't we call that authorized? It'll be either true or false. Then inside, let's first process what we're going to do if authorized is false. So we could say if authorized equals false, or we could say not operator, which is exclamation point. That means if authorized is not true, which is the same as saying if authorized equals false. Use whichever version you like, but make sure that you know what exclamation point authorized means. And I'm going to use a compound conditional here because I don't just want to show the alert if our local notification manager is not authorized. I want to show it if it's both not authorized and if that reminder switch is switched on green. I don't want to warn them if the reminder switch is already off because it's not going to impact them. But if we're both not authorized and the reminder switch is on, then show them the warning. So the way that I'm going to do this is I'm going to say ampersand ampersand for compound conditional self.reminderswitch.isOn. Then I'll say self.oneButtonAlert. Remember, we're inside of ToDoTableViewController, which is a subclass of UITableViewController, which is a subclass of UIViewController, so we can access our extension OneButtonAlert in here. Working great. Press return. Then instead of typing in the title and message here, I'll be a little lazy, and I'll hop back over to our list notification manager.swift, and I'll grab the whole after part of where we previously called OneButtonAlert on this view controller here, and copy that. Then return to my to-do list table view controller, and then I'll just highlight the one button alert here and paste over what I just copied. That's perfect. Save me from having to retype the title and message. And then we also want to make sure that we've switched the reminder switch to off. So we'll say self.reminderswitch.isOn equals false. Now the rest of what we want to do in here is the same stuff that we did whenever we clicked on that reminder switch. So if we scroll down in here, we can actually find our IB action, the function reminder switch changed. Let's highlight all 4 lines that are in there. We'll cut those out. We'll replace them with a call to update reminder switch. We'll return to update reminder switch. And just after this compound if statement, we'll paste in those 4 lines we just cut. Now we're inside of a closure, the completion handler here after local notification manager. So we need to put selfs in front of a bunch of these values here. So I'm going to copy self dot and I'll paste it in front of date label, reminder switch, and the 2 table view calls down here. All those errors go away. And then we'll build and run and see how things look. And it's not going to work. Although it starts out promising, we get our message down here that says the user has denied notifications. When we click on plus, oh, we get this gnarly error, and this should look familiar. Can you guess what you're going to have to do? Pause, resume, And we see a bunch of errors in here, all relating to the thread. Remember when we had problems with a thread before? Well, this is the exact same thing. Inside a local notification manager, we are calling UI functions that should be on the main thread inside of the local notification manager completion handler, which is operating on a background thread. But we know how to fix that. We need to do that dispatch queue.main.async. In fact, we can just go over to local notification manager, copy that line, return to to-do detail table view controller, make a space right after our call to local notification manager, paste in the dispatch queue.main.async, make sure we got open and close curlies in there, then highlight everything below that was still inside of the local notification manager completion handler. So with that highlighted, Command X to cut it out, and then paste it in between the curlies after the dispatch queue.main.async. I'll make sure everything is reformatted with a Command A, Control I. My Xcode's a little slow in catching up to my code. I've got an error and warning showing up in the Windows title bar, but those are going to go away when I build and run. And let's take a look. We get our warning message as expected because the user had initially denied notifications. If we click on plus, no crashes at all. This is looking good. If we click on our switch, we don't turn on the switch, we turn the switch off. We give the user a warning. You can ignore the warning that says CF run loop run specific in the background. That's currently an issue that Apple's dealing with. It's not you. We can do this again and again, and because the user had turned off notifications, they cannot turn on this reminder switch. Excellent! Mission accomplished. A lot of advanced topics as we're finishing up our to-do list, but your skills are growing. Hope you're feeling good about this, Swifter. Keep at it.